Hi, Stuart.
Hello.
Nice to meet you.
You too.
I'm so glad we're being able to do this. So, do you want to just tell my audience a bit about what you do?
Sure. So the company's called Applied Neuroscience Solutions Limited. We use the applied neuroscience of the electroencephalogram, the EEG, to help people's brains work better. And we offer two main services. One of them is neurofeedback therapy, where we use the principles of neuroplasticity and the ability of the brain to learn from feedback to help people with a wide range of mental health and neurological issues. And we offer a peak performance service as well. The other service that we offer is a brain mapping service, which is kind of like an X-ray of your brain using the EEG, and we do two versions of that. One which has a number of psychological markers, which research has demonstrated are associated with particular traits, particularly useful for people who've been through trauma. And we are just launching another one, which is slightly different. It actually analyses the EEG with regard to a number of patterns that have been associated with particular symptoms. So it's got markers for ADHD symptoms, autistic spectrum symptoms, anxiety symptoms, addiction symptoms, etc., etc.
Okay, that sounds fascinating. So you do two services. The main one is like neurofeedback and helping the brain learn from itself. And by giving it appropriate feedback, then you can rewire the brain in a way that you would like to.
Exactly. And I should stress, we don't need to do the brain map to do the neurofeedback. Neurofeedback comes in a number of different flavours, and the most contemporary method doesn't need a brain map in order to design the plan. So we're leveraging the brain's plasticity, the fact that the brain is an amazing thing that will make sense of information that you give it. Okay, and if need be, it will change to make sense of information that you give it. And I like to use the example of our auditory cortex or our auditory cortices. Were not designed to be auditory cortices. No, all of our auditory cortices became auditory cortices because that part of the brain was trying to make sense of the information it was receiving from our ears. And so it's that the brain is extremely plastic, and we're leveraging that ability. We're giving the brain information about itself so it can learn to regulate that part of itself better.
Okay, so that sounds amazing. So when you said the auditory example, it kind of made me think of when someone's talking and they say a word, but maybe they're mumbling it and I don't really know what they're saying, but my brain's told me they've said, this and this. Is that similar to what you're explaining in your example?
It is, I think, in the sense that the brain will try to make sense of information, and even when that information is incomplete, it will sort of fill in the gaps. It will predict what that person was meaning to say in that example, even though they were mumbling a bit. Okay, so the brain, it's a bit like, you can take the vowels out of a word, can't you? Yeah. And the brain still recognises what the word is.
Yeah.
It's leveraging that ability of the brain almost to make sense of information, even when that information isn't presented in the way that we would normally expect it to be.
Okay, that sounds fascinating. As a mum, what you're saying, I'd feel scared that it's going to be very invasive. Mm-hmm. So, is it invasive?
No, I mean, we put wires on the head, okay, which is tricky for some. Officially they're called electrodes, but we prefer to call them sensors or wires, because electrode sounds like electrocution, which is not what we're doing. And what we're doing with those wires, we stick those to the head with a substance which is a little bit like Vaseline in its consistency. So we apply 4 or 5 of those to the head, and they're just acting like little electronic stethoscopes, just picking up the brainwave activity. And we can show people their brainwave activity on the TV screen. And then that goes into the computer. A computer processes it, and then it generates feedback. And the feedback is presented usually through video. And so the client chooses a video. We've got a catalogue of about 1,000 videos, movies, documentaries, any video file you want to bring along we can use. And what happens is the picture changes in size, which is feedback through the eyes, the volume changes, which is feedback through the ears, and we have a cuddly toy which sits next to you with a little vibrating device in it, and that vibrates and it gives you feedback through your sense of touch. So we use those three inputs into the nervous system, which includes the brain. So to your question, Tabor, is it invasive? No, it's not at all. It's the brain that's deciding what to do with that information. All we're doing is we're giving the brain information.
Okay, that sounds amazing. So it's definitely not invasive. It doesn't sound invasive at all. So you could hypothetically be just watching like a Spider-Man movie, and the child won't even know they're having neurofeedback treatment, except for the small sensors on their head.
Correct, and the fact that the picture keeps changing in size.
Yeah, but depending on the age of the child, they might not even ask questions about that.
They normally it's not a problem. There are different modes where you can adjust it so that you can only see part of the picture. We don't use that one. We use it where you can see the whole of the picture, but the whole picture changes in size.
Okay, so how do you know it's working? So often at home, my TV screen will distort. So is that what's that doing to my brain then? Is it neurofeedback? How do you know what you're doing is working?
Well, we ask the clients what they care about, what they want to see changed. When we create a plan, we ask them to review a list of 180 symptoms, and we map those different symptoms, different brain functions, and therefore different neurofeedback protocols to create their neurofeedback plan. So a neurofeedback protocol is where you put the wires, what you're doing with the information that you pick up, what frequency you're tuning into, and we ask the clients to pick out a manageable subset of those symptoms, usually between 3 and 7 is a good number, and we ask them how severe are they on a scale of 0 to 10. And usually they're high, because these are the things they want to see improved. And then we've got an online symptom tracking system which automatically sends the client an email at an agreed frequency, and we ask them to reassess. So it was a 10 last time. Is it a 9? Is it what is it now? And what we're really asking them is not what it is out of 10, is it getting better? So if you're looking for a child, you're really looking for externally observable symptoms. With an adult or someone who can report, then you can internal symptoms work as well. But with a child, you're really looking for things that the adults can externally observe, and that's the way it works. So we measure what you care about. And if it gets better, it's working. If it doesn't get better, it's not working.
So what kind of symptoms do you work with? And is this a permanent thing? Like you rewire the brain once and that's them done? They won't have those symptoms again for the rest of their life?
It's a learning process. So the benchmark appears to be that when you do 20 sessions, that learning is permanent. And there are studies. A guy called Jimmy Ghazali has done studies showing after a program of neurofeedback physical changes in the brain, i.e. the grey matter, the neurons, the volume gets bigger, so there's more brain, and the white matter tracks, the connections between the areas, they get longer. And that ties in with our clinical experience. After 20 sessions, we'd expect the results to be lasting. The only situation where you might want to continue doing it is if you had some sort of degenerative brain condition, because obviously we can't stop that. We might be able to strengthen other areas to balance the effects out, but we can't stop any degeneration. But for most of our clients, we'd expect the 20 sessions and the results will last. Some people will benefit from more than 20 sessions. Severely autistic child, severely traumatized adult, where those behaviour patterns are quite ingrained, they might benefit from more.
That's amazing. So you've got, after 20 sessions, you can see permanent restructuring changes in the brain.
Studies have shown that, yes.
Oh, that's
yes.
amazing. Cool. So you must have a lot of happy clients. We
do. We've seen hundreds of people, but one of the difficult sells is it's almost too good to be true.
Yeah.
Because to an educated person, you tell them about this, and they're asking themselves, well, if this is as good as you're telling me, how come I haven't heard of it?
Yeah.
And it's even more difficult with professionals, like, for example, a psychiatrist or a neurologist, because someone like us comes along and says, look, I've got something here that in some ways is better than what you've got. It's not new and you've never heard of it. That is a significant threat to the professional ego, or it can be, if those egos are relatively fragile. So that's one of the challenges of introducing something like this. It's overcoming that skepticism. I think largely is driven by a desire to protect the status quo and to protect egos.
Yeah, well, obviously we've got an increase in mental health conditions going on in this country and in this world. So if whatever we're doing in the status quo is not working, so it's nothing really good to protect there if you want to actually help your child or help yourself.
I totally agree. I mean, the way I describe it is there's two prevailing paradigms of mental health at the moment. One of them is the psychiatric paradigm, where mental health issues are seen as issues of brain chemistry imbalance, and the primary solution is to take medications to change the brain chemistry. But, you know, the success rate for those interventions is low. It doesn't even pretend to address the root cause.
Yeah.
Only works whilst you're taking it, if it works, and there are often side effects. And the other paradigm is a psychotherapeutic paradigm, which sees mental health as issues of learnt behaviour, and the solution is to unlearn those behaviours, often through some sort of talking therapy.
Yeah, like CBT.
It's like CBT, exactly. And again, you know, that can be extremely effective, but if you've got a dysregulated nervous system, and that's what we see, that's the way we look at symptoms like ADHD, like autistic spectrum, like PTSD symptoms, like migraines, like seizures. They're all indications of a dysregulated chronic fatigue, dysregulated nervous system. Neither of those paradigms you would even present themselves as addressing that. That's where the therapy that we offer can be very, very effective.
Well, the narrative I mostly hear from parents and from professionals is your child has ADHD or autism because their brain is wired like that, and they don't even discuss the possibility of brains having that potential to rewire. So that's the consistent narrative I hear from professionals in this country, which is really disappointing.
It's interesting. I think if you look back at the history of brain plasticity, for many, many years, they were scared to even use the word plasticity in papers because they got rocks thrown at them, because the prevailing paradigm was the brain cannot change. And I think we're left with the legacy of that, even though I think that was debunked 25, 30 years ago. We know the brain is plastic. And one of the pieces of research that I think is very helpful in explaining this to people is some work that came out of David Eagleman's team in the last couple of years, where they have hypothesized that the reason that we dream whilst we're sleeping is a defensive mechanism, because it's to stop the visual cortex being taken over by other senses. There was a good podcast, I think Tim Ferriss interviewed Eagleman about 6 months ago on exactly this subject. And what scientists have discovered is that I think we already knew that if a particular part of the brain, for example the visual system, isn't working because the eyes aren't working, so say the eyes are damaged and the person doesn't have sight, we know that the part of their brain that is normally used to give us the sense of sight will start to strengthen other senses like touch, like sound.
Yeah.
But we didn't realise how quickly it happens until recently, when they did research where they blindfolded people and gave them a sensory task to conduct, and they discovered that within an hour, not only did they get better at that sensory task, they also discovered that what was happening was that their sense of touch was taking over their sense of sight in their brain. So what the scientists now believe is that the reason that we dream is it's to protect our visual cortex. If we didn't dream, when we woke up in the morning, we wouldn't be able to see properly, because other senses would have taken over that visual cortex.
That is fascinating. So just within 1 hour, your brain has rewired itself to strengthen your other senses rather than your eyesight.
Yeah.
If you are blindfolded.
Yeah.
That is amazing, and it actually really brings a lot of a lot of effect in what you're doing as well. Like when you say your brain can change quite quickly, so that's great.
Absolutely, yeah, it's fascinating.
It's fascinating, yeah. So, like, what kind of patients do you work with? Who do you usually see? What's been your most difficult case?
Oh,
because I know you've been. How many years have you been?
We've been going more than 10 years.
More than 10 years. What's been your most difficult case in the last 10 years? The one that's always stuck with you.
I think the most difficult case, schizophrenia. Schizophrenia is a very, very complex condition, and it's very sad really because there is a very limited amount that conventional medicine can offer. With that case, though, we did achieve some progress, but it got to the point where the client, this comes with the territory because you're picking up their brainwaves. They start thinking that you can see their thoughts.
Okay.
And so whilst they did engage, I think they did engage for a good 20 sessions. For a condition like that, you're really going to need to do it for longer than that.
Wow. Okay. So after 20 sessions, was there a permanent change for them?
I believe there was. Their family were reporting
that's really good.
The change, but they were still really, really struggling with the schizophrenia.
So I actually have some patients who struggle with consistent bedwetting.
Mm-hmm.
Is that something you help with? Because that's quite common for parents of autistic children.
I think if the issue is their sensory system is not detecting that they need to use the toilet, then I think what neurofeedback could do is to improve the regulation of the nervous system so that they're more likely to pick up that sensation. And so, yes.
Even when they're sleeping then?
Yeah.
Oh, that's great. So it can help?
I think it could.
With 20 sessions or?
Yeah. I can't claim great experience, but I'm sure we've got colleagues in other parts of the world who have.
Oh, that's amazing. Okay, so what would you say neurofeedback can't do? What's some of its limitations?
It can't necessarily change behaviour. Okay? Now, some cases, like severe anxiety, okay, if you can remove the anxiety, which we can, life changes. It just opens up possibilities.
Yeah.
Okay? I think with other symptoms, like ADHD possibly, sometimes we see parents who say, my child's got a diagnosis of ADHD and they're addicted to video games.
Yeah.
Right? And they may be addicted to video games, but if the child doesn't see a problem with being addicted to video games, that behaviour is not going to change. Neurofeedback might reduce their need to be distracted or by a video game, but it's not necessarily going to change that behaviour.
Okay.
So I
think behaviour is a choice as well.
Exactly.
It's not just all brain activity, it's a choice.
Exactly. And I think you didn't ask this question, but I sort of flip the question around. I think where neurofeedback can be particularly strong is if you compare it, for example, with ABA, which I know was a few years ago was very popular amongst the autistic parents, very, very expensive as well. All you're doing with that is you're changing the behavioural choices that the person has. I think with neurofeedback we can give them new choices.
Okay.
So I think it can work at a deeper level. It can give people new choices, new capabilities.
Okay, that sounds amazing. That sounds very, very fascinating. Okay, so would you say it works better for children then? Because for children with children of autism or ADHD, they may have an addiction to screens, but they're making less of those conscious choices. It's more of a habit. Maybe over the age of 7 or or older, they're saying they're making more of these choices. So would you say it's more effective for children for that reason?
I think it probably is. What we haven't noticed, it's not the case that we could say we see adults and children and it works better with children than it does with adults. We see it work equally as well with adults, but I suspect that the effect is stronger in children, and one reason I suspect that is because the brain is more plastic when you're younger.
Yeah.
And one of the bits of research that David Eagleman's team has done to support their theory that the reason we dream is to protect our visual cortex is to identify that the plasticity of the brain does change as we get as we get older. We know that, but also the amount of REM sleep, the dream sleep, gets lesser, which kind of fits in with that hypothesis. If the reason we dream is to protect our brain from using its plasticity to take over the visual cortex, then as the brain becomes less plastic, we need less dreaming time to protect it.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah. No, so so as far as I know, that, and that's another thing that's so groundbreaking about neuroplasticity, that you can change your brain at any age. And I think after the age of 75, there is evidence you can even change your brain a little bit after that, but it does stop it. It kind of.
We've had people in
goes
their
down.
80s, yeah.
You've had people in your 80s?
In their 80s, so
Wow.
we have, yeah.
Okay, so another question I have to ask as a parent is dyslexia. Can you help children with dyslexia?
I think we can, but I wouldn't want to give it the hard sell.
Okay.
There is some research. There's not a vast amount of research though. I think it could help. I wouldn't want to rule it out, but I wouldn't want to oversell it.
Okay, so why do you think it can't help with dyslexia, but it can help with autism or ADHD?
I think where it's really strong is where you've got a dysregulated nervous system.
Okay.
I think with dyslexia, I think it's more of a functional deficit.
Functional deficit.
Yeah.
What do you mean by that?
It doesn't. For whatever reason, that information is not being processed in the way it was designed to be.
Okay, that's interesting. That's really, really interesting. Is there anything else you want to tell me about neurofeedback or brain mapping or?
Well, people can look at the website. It's braintrainuk.com. That's the trading name. If people are interested, we do offer a 15-minute free consultation by phone, and then if they want to take the next step, we offer an initial appointment, which includes your first neurofeedback session. We all need to ask some basic questions to know where to start, and that costs £95. And if you proceed with a program within 7 days, then we will credit that £95 on the price of the package. So if people want to know more, they can go to braintrainuk.com and reach out, and we would be glad to explain more.
That sounds amazing. So how many clinics do you have in the UK?
We have 5, let me count them. We have one in central London, Hanover Square, round the back of Oxford Circus. We have one in Farnborough on the Hampshire-Surrey border. We have one in Egham on the sort of Surrey-West London border. We have one in Crawley in West Sussex near Gatwick Airport, and we have one in Birmingham.
Okay.
We also offer a home training service whereby we will ship the equipment to the family, and we take you through the process. We teach you how to operate the equipment under the supervision of one of our practitioners.
Okay, so it's available. Would you say it's just available in the UK or is it worldwide?
We just cover the UK.
You just do cover the UK. Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much, Stuart. That's been a really fascinating conversation.
Thank you so much for asking me to take part in this session.
Thank you.